In the spring of 1924, a Sicilian baker on Court Street in Brooklyn could walk into any neighborhood meeting in any borough and leave with a customer, a friend, or a favor owed. He spoke broken English. He had no education. He had no money. What he had was a code, a set of unwritten rules that no Italian father ever taught his sons in front of Americans, because you were not supposed to let outsiders see how you worked a room. The baker died in 1961. His grandson found the rules written nowhere. They had only ever lived in the hands and the eyes of the men who practiced them. They did not call it charm. They called it rispetto, respect given before it was earned, withdrawn the moment it was insulted. Every gesture had been carried across the Atlantic in steerage. Every rule had been tested in villages where a wrong word could cost a family for 3 generations. Then the grandsons grew up. The grandsons moved to Long Island. The grandsons decided the old country ways were embarrassing. We did not lose this code. We chose to bury it. Number 19 on this list took less than 2 seconds and turned a stranger into a man who owed you a favor for the rest of his life. Number 12 directly contradicted every piece of business advice taught in American schools, and the Italian men who ignored the American advice and used the old rule outsold their American competitors for 40 straight years. And number 2, the rule that built more loyalty in working-class Brooklyn than any other single behavior, was passed down in a single sentence, in dialect, and was never written down because writing it down would have insulted it. These 25 tricks were not about being smooth. They were about being remembered. They were the difference between a greenhorn who got pushed aside and a man who walked out of any room with 3 new friends. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 lost Italian immigrant charm tricks Brooklyn fathers used to win any room in the 1920s. Number 25th, the 2-handed handshake. When the moment mattered between 2 Italian men, the right hand met the other man's right hand, and the left hand covered the back of it. Briefly, 1 second, then released. For a young longshoreman in 1923, Red Hook meeting his future father-in-law for the first time, the 2-hand grip was the entire courtship. The older man did not smile. He did not need to. The gesture had been read. Sicilian fathers had used it for 100 years before the boat carried any of them to Brooklyn. The left hand said this was not business. This was blood. Number 24, compliment the mother first, before the wife, before the children, before the food on the table. The first compliment in any Italian home belonged to the mother of the man who lived there. For a butcher from Bari calling on a Carroll Gardens family in 1925, the compliment to the absent mother was the entrance fee. He had never met her. He praised her anyway. The son's chest filled. The door opened wider. In an Italian house, every man was first somebody's son. The mother said it before the man did. Number 23, the pause at the threshold. An Italian guest did not walk into another man's home. He stopped at the door. He waited. He let the host invite him across. 2 seconds, 3 at most. For a tailor's apprentice in 1922 in Williamsburg, delivering a finished jacket to a customer's apartment, the pause was the lesson his uncle had drilled into him at 12. A man who walked in unbidden had announced he did not need permission. A man who waited had announced he understood the house belonged to someone else. In Sicilian custom, the threshold was sacred ground. The pause was the whole sentence. Number 22. Kiss the hand of the old woman. When you entered the home of an Italian matriarch, a grandmother, a widowed aunt, the senior woman of any family, you bent slightly and touched her right hand to your lips. La mano baciata. Briefly. Once. For a young Calabrian construction worker in 1924, paying his first visit to his fiancée's grandmother in Bensonhurst, the kissed hand was the entire approval process. The old woman said nothing. She nodded once. The marriage was permitted. American observers found this gesture servile and theatrical. The men who practiced it understood it was the opposite. It was the only way to thank a woman who had raised 3 generations without ever being thanked. Number 21. Walk slow down the block. Italian men did not hurry on their own street. They walked at a pace that said the street belonged to them. Hands often behind the back, hat tipped slightly, eyes meeting every stoop. For a Sicilian fishmonger in 1923, walking home down President Street after closing his stand, the slow walk was a daily declaration. Every neighbor on every stoop saw him pass. He nodded to each one by name, 15 nods over 3 blocks. The whole neighborhood knew he was home before he reached his door. A man who hurried down his own street was a man being chased by something. An Italian father refused to be that man. Number 20. Never eat alone in public. To sit at a counter and eat alone was a confession that no one had wanted you at their table. The rule held wherever Italians gathered. If you were caught alone at a lunch hour, another Italian man would often join you within minutes, uninvited and welcomed. For a printer's helper in 1925 working a late shift in Sunset Park, the rule meant he could not remember the last midday meal he had eaten by himself. The table was the entire society. To eat alone was to opt out of being human. Number 19. The hand on the forearm. When you spoke to another Italian man and the words mattered, your left hand rested briefly on his right forearm, just above the wrist. One pulse of pressure. Released. For a barber in 1922, Bay Ridge, telling a regular customer the price had gone up, the touch was the apology and the firmness in one gesture. The customer paid without complaint. He had not been told. He had been confided in. American business culture forbids the touch. Italian business culture required it. The touch said, "This is between us, not between strangers." Number 18. Speak about the father, not the son. When you praised a young man, you praised his father first. You would say your father raised you well. You would say your father would be proud today. The compliment skipped a generation on purpose. For a fruit vendor in 1924 in Greenpoint, speaking to a young customer who had just paid honestly for a difficult order, the line about the father was worth more than any direct praise. The young man went home and told his father. The father came back the next week and bought twice as much. Praise the root, and the branch will grow toward you. Number 17. The quiet voice in a loud room. When the table got loud, when the argument got hot, the Italian father did not raise his voice. He lowered it. Everyone at the table had to lean in to hear him. The room got quiet within 10 seconds. For a Calabrian foreman in 1923 at a packed Knights of Columbus meeting on Smith Street, the quiet voice was the entire authority. He had never shouted in his life. He had never needed to. In the old country, a loud man was a man who had run out of standing. The whispered word from the senior man at the table carried more weight than any shout. A loud man was a man who had not yet learned that volume is what a man uses when he has run out of weight. Here is what nobody says out loud about the Brooklyn of 1924. Italian immigrants were not welcome in most of the city. They were called Dagos in newspapers. They were refused jobs above the street level. They were locked out of unions, banks, and most of the better neighborhoods. And yet, within 20 years, they had built parallel institutions so strong that the rest of the city had to come to them for bread, for fish, for tailoring, for construction, for music, for marriage. They did not do this with money. They did not have money. They did it with a code, a set of social rules so disciplined that men who shared no language could do business on a handshake and a forearm touch. We inherited that code and threw it away inside of 2 generations. We called it old country nonsense. The old country had built something. We had not yet built a replacement. Number 16, bring something small to every door. An Italian did not arrive empty-handed. A loaf, a bottle, a piece of fruit, a flower from the yard, anything. The smallness was the whole point. For a stonemason in 1925, Park Slope, visiting his cousin's apartment on a Sunday afternoon, the small gift was a sentence. I did not come to take. The cousin's wife saw the bread. She remembered the bread for 40 years. She did not remember most of what was said that afternoon. The empty hand was an insult older than language. The full hand was a promise older than money. Number 15, the long goodbye. The Italian farewell took 20 minutes. You said goodbye in the kitchen. You said goodbye again in the hallway, again at the door, again on the stoop, again from the sidewalk. For a Sicilian father in 1923 leaving his sister's apartment in Bensonhurst after Sunday dinner, the long goodbye was the whole point of the visit. Each repetition was a small refusal to let the visit end cleanly. The leaving said the loving was not finished. We invented the Irish exit because we forgot how to do the Italian one. Number 14, praise the work, not the man. When an Italian wanted to compliment another man's labor, he praised the work itself. He might say that the stitching is beautiful, not that you are a great tailor. For an electrician in 1924 watching a Neapolitan shoemaker repair a difficult heel on Sackett Street, praise of the work was the only acceptable form. To praise the man directly was to flatter. To praise the work was to honor. The shoemaker glowed. He did not have to deny anything. The work had been seen. American culture taught men to praise the person. Italian culture knew the person could not receive the praise honestly. Only the work could. Number 13, the nod that costs a favor. When another Italian man nodded to you across a room, slowly, once, with intent, you had been asked a question without words. Are you with me on this? The answering nod was a commitment. For a Sicilian dock supervisor in 1925, at a wedding in Bath Beach, watching another supervisor nod toward a younger relative across the hall, the returned nod meant the younger man was being vouched for, and a job would be found for him by Tuesday. The first nod was the request. The second was the contract. Italian men could move whole lives across a room with 2 chin lifts. The English-speaking world watched and never understood what had happened. Number 12, remember the Saint's Day. Every Italian had 2 birthdays, the day of birth and the day of the saint they were named for. The Saint's Day mattered more. To remember an acquaintance's Saint's Day and send a small note was a gesture so disarming it created lifelong loyalty. For a pushcart vendor in 1923 Bensonhurst, remembering the feast of St. Anthony for a customer named Antonio, the small wish was worth 100 sales. The customer told his cousins. The cousins came. They came for 30 years. The Saint's Day was the day the soul was named. To remember it was to remember the soul itself. Number 11, the refusal to be rushed. When another man tried to hurry an Italian, a customer, a foreman, or a stranger, the Italian did not speed up. He slowed down slightly, deliberately. For a Sicilian cobbler in Carroll Gardens in 1924, Being pressed by an impatient American customer, the small slowing was the whole answer. The work would be done when the work was done. The customer left angry. He came back the next month and waited 2 weeks for the next pair. In the old country, a man who could be rushed was a man who could be moved. An Italian father raised his sons to be neither. Number 10. Speak the other man's town. When you met another Italian, you asked where his people were from before you asked anything else. The town, not the region, not the country, the town. For a bricklayer in 1925 meeting a new neighbor on 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, the question about the town was the handshake. The neighbor said, Avellino. The bricklayer said his mother was from Benevento. They were brothers inside one sentence. To an Italian, Italy was not a country. It was 1,000 villages, and only the village mattered. The town was the whole address of the soul. Number 9. The silence that asks the question. When an Italian needed information from another man, and the question was delicate, he did not ask. He waited. He sat with him. He drank coffee. He said nothing for 2 minutes. The other man filled the silence. For a Brooklyn ward man in 1924, sitting across from a butcher about a rumor on Union Street, the silence was the entire interrogation. The butcher talked. He did not know why. He had been raised in a culture where silence between two men sitting together carried meaning, and an unfilled silence was a question that demanded an answer. In the 1920s, observers at settlement houses in Lower Manhattan and Brooklyn kept written records of how immigrant communities formed trust with strangers. The patterns they noted were striking. Italian immigrants built working trust with strangers far faster than the Anglo-Protestant control groups in the same neighborhoods. The observers could not fully explain it. They described what they called a high-touch, low-volume social pattern and let the matter drop. The pattern was a code. The code was not in any book. It was in the hands of every father from Palermo to Naples who had ever taught a son how to stand in a doorway. The settlement house notes sat in archives for 90 years. The grandsons of the men described in those pages never read them. They had stopped doing the things the notes described. The drink you pay for first. When you walked into a cafe or a club where another man was already seated, you paid for his next drink before you greeted him, quietly, to the bartender. The drink arrived. The other man looked up. You sat down. For a wine importer in 1925 walking into a social club on Henry Street, the prepaid drink was the entire negotiation. The other man understood the deal had already been weighted in his favor. The conversation went his guest's way. The drink had cost 20 cents. The contract that came out of the meeting was worth $400. Number 7. The compliment to the daughter through the father. You never complimented a young woman directly in front of her father. Instead, you praised her to him. You would say, "You have raised a fine daughter." The daughter heard. The father swelled. No one felt embarrassed. For a Sicilian land broker in 1923, calling on a family in Diker Heights about a property deal, the compliment to the daughter through the father was the lesson his own father had given him at 16. The deal closed at full price. The daughter married his nephew 2 years later. The praise had traveled the only road that was not insulting. Number 6. The refusal to discuss money at the table. The table was for family, for food, for stories. Money was for the back room, the stoop, the walk to the corner. To bring money to the table was to insult the meal. For a fish merchant in 1924, Sheepshead Bay, hosting a buyer for Sunday lunch, the rule was iron. They ate for 2 hours. They spoke of children and saints and the old country. They walked to the corner together afterward and settled the deal in 4 minutes. The deal had been built at the table. The numbers were a formality. Number 5. The story instead of the argument. When another man disagreed with an Italian father and the disagreement could turn ugly, he did not argue. He told a story about his grandfather, about a man in the old country, about a wedding he had attended. The story made the point his argument could not. For a Sicilian patriarch in 1925 at a wake in Bensonhurst, correcting a younger cousin who had spoken out of turn, the story was a 5-minute parable about a man who had insulted his uncle in 1898. The cousin understood. No one was shamed. The lesson stayed. Number 4. The promise made with the eyes only. The most serious Italian promises were not spoken. They were made with a single long look across a room or a table. 5 seconds. Held, released. For a Brooklyn padrone in 1923, promising a young laborer from Bari that his family would be brought over within the year, the look was the whole contract. No paper, no witness. The boat tickets arrived 11 months later. A promise spoken aloud could be denied. A promise made with the eyes was binding because both men knew no one else had seen it. The honor was the entire collateral. Number 3. Honor the old man in the room. The oldest man at any Italian gathering was greeted first. His chair was brought first. His glass was filled first. His opinion was asked before any other. For a young Sicilian newcomer in 1924, attending his first community meeting on Union Street, the rule was the first lesson and the last. The old man was the memory of the village. To skip him was to declare the village did not matter. The young man who honored the old man without being told had announced himself as someone raised correctly. 3 men offered him work that night. Number 2. La parola. La parola. The power of one's word. What an Italian said he would do, he did. If the harvest was Tuesday, he was there on Tuesday. If the loan would be repaid in May, it was repaid in May. The word was the whole man. For a Calabrian construction foreman in 1925, hiring a crew off the corner of Atlantic Avenue, the only question that mattered was whether a man's word was good. References meant nothing. Resumes did not exist. The word was the entire economy. A man whose word was broken was not a man with a problem. He was a man no longer trading in this market. Number 1. Sit down at the table. That is all. When you were invited, you came. When you came, you stayed. When you stayed, you ate everything that was offered, and you listened more than you spoke. For a Neapolitan immigrant in Brooklyn in 1922, invited to a stranger's Sunday dinner because he was a friend of a cousin, the rule was the entire inheritance. He sat, he ate, he listened for 3 hours. He went back the next Sunday and the next. 40 years later, the strangers were his family. The grandchildren called him uncle. He had done nothing remarkable. He had simply accepted the invitation and stayed at the table long enough to belong there. None of this required money. None of it required English. None of it required a chamber of commerce, a networking event, a self-help book, or a single dollar spent on instruction. It required a father, a grandfather, an uncle, a neighbor, and the willingness to be corrected by them for 30 years. The hat at the threshold. The drink paid for in advance. The hand of the old woman. The story instead of the argument. The eyes that made the promise. The table that was not for money. These were not the habits of phonies. These were the habits of men who had crossed an ocean with nothing and had decided that what they brought with them in their hands and their eyes was the only fortune they would ever need. The grandsons forgot. The great-grandsons never knew. The code is still on the shelf. The doorway is still there. The only thing missing is the man who used to stand at it and wait to be invited in.